This is Kingdom Warrior. I'm your host, Andrea Beam, and every episode we bring you powerful conversations with bold business owners, passionate young adults, and overcomers who have turned their toughest battles into breakthrough moments. We dive into practical business strategies, leadership insights, and the mindset that fuels resilience, so that you can overcome obstacles and scale your calling with confidence. If this speaks to you, hit subscribe now on your favorite platform so you never miss an episode, and share it with someone who needs a shot of bold faith and courage today. All right, so today, you guys, we are here with Jason Richards. I'm really excited to introduce you guys to Jason because Jason and I have had an opportunity to get to know each other over the last couple months, preparing to be able to speak on stage together at an event that was held last week. And I know you guys are going to love him just as much as I do. And we've kind of decided that we're like twins, sort of. We definitely have so much overlapping stuff, and it's kind of fun. So you guys, Jason is the owner of a company called Lead Academy. He also is an entrepreneur, an executive, a business strategist, and he's going to share all kinds of things to you today, not just practical and tactical, but we're going to dive deep into faith and deep into how that plays a role in his business. And we're gonna go deep. We're not surfing today. We're scuba diving. So welcome, Jason.
Hey, thanks. It's gonna be fun.
Yeah, it is. So let's just start out with, give us just a brief synopsis of kind of how you got to where you're at today. What's kind of led you to the point that you're at, maybe kind of hitting some of the highlight spots, and then we're going to go back and dig deeper into each of these.
Sure. Yeah, fair enough. So I'm actually a Montana kid. And the question I always get from people is, have you seen Yellowstone? Which I haven't, but it's beautiful. Montana's a great place to grow up and obviously shaped a lot of mindset and things like that. Kind of the tough cowboy independent spirit thing that Montanans are known for.
100%.
Yeah. And, which is good and bad. Ended up, I grew up, since we're talking more about faith, my dad, felt a call to ministry. And so I was a pastor's kid. Moved when I think I was 8th grade. He took over a church in Helena, just the capital of Montana. And so as a pastor's kid, went to the Christian school, all those different things, but kind of felt this weird angst. Ended up getting done with high school a year early, went into a ministry training program called Master's Commission, which is kind of like YWAM. If people are familiar with that.
Yeah.
And that was cool because I was able to travel different parts of the world. Some crazy things that happened in Guatemala, if you want to unpack that, but yeah, and then felt like I was supposed to go into ministry. So I actually became a youth pastor, and I was under my dad for 6 years as a youth pastor. And during that time, it was interesting because my name was thrown in the hat to take over this other church in Billings, Montana. And it was a good sized church for, I think it was like 4,000 or 6,000 people at the time, something like that. And I'm a 25-year-old kid, and somebody said, hey, you should take this church over. And so I ended up meeting with the founding pastor of that church, Stan. I was speaking at some event for the district, and Stan and I met and we had coffee, and he said, hey, I said, what do we do with this? And I don't know, I've got this business opportunity thing. I could go this way, I could do that, whatever. And it was so funny because Stan, leaned across the table, and he's been doing it for 40 years. And he just kind of looks at me. He's like, Jason, he's like, if you don't know that you know that you know that God is calling you to do this, devil's just going to kick your ass. I was like, okay.
Love those straightforward people. Okay.
Yeah. So, but really, I mean, it was some good wisdom. And so it was at that point, it was about 6 months later, I was done working for the church, and I still served in things, but it took me on a path of business. And so started a couple of small companies, especially when my wife graduated nursing school, 0809, right? The economy crashed. And so, I was working 3 or 4 jobs and started a couple side businesses to make it work. All that to say, that ended up taking me to Seattle. And in Seattle, I was there for about 4 years. And at that time, started working with my cousins in the tech industry. And so there was a software company that they were having me run. And it was kind of like international business, dropped in my lap and said, good luck, see what you can do with this. Because we had our development team was over in India, and we had our sales team was in Australia. We had stuff all over different parts of the world. And so
Nothing like sink or swim. Like,
yo, man. Yeah. So I was like, I don't know the first thing about software. That's actually, I told my cousin Kevin, I said, I don't know the first thing about software. He's like, well, you're good with people. You'll be fine. It's like, okay, thanks.
tax
So
people, I feel like those are two different
yeah,
worlds.
seems a little different, but it was a very cool opportunity. I'm super grateful. And that's actually how I ended up down here in Oregon, because it was, during that time, I was kind of getting tired of living in Seattle. And he said, well, why don't you move down here? We need help scaling a couple of other companies. And so ended up moving down here to Oregon in 2018. 2020, the world lost its mind. And so it didn't actually build a whole lot of relationships here in Oregon. Everything kind of closed down. And it wasn't, it was actually during that time that a friend from Montana came and visited me. And he said, hey, how did you guys grow this company? And so I just gave him a couple pointers. I was like, we did this. Here's a book to read, that kind of stuff. And he pestered me basically for the rest of the year. So end of 2020, I flew out to Montana and started helping his team come together and start to grow. So at the time, I think they had like 7 people that worked for him, and they 10x'd in about 3 years. And so then it became hey, Jason, you should talk to Frank, and you should talk to Jacob, and you should talk to all these different people. And so kind of accidentally, that's how I ended up doing what I do now, which is running around and helping companies get their stuff together so they can do better.
One of the things that we talked about on stage last week was from that book called The Power of Moments by Chip and Dan Heath, and where they talk about the peaks and the pits and the transitions in our life. Kind of go over, give me 3 peaks for you. What are like 3 peaks in your life in the career realm? Like I'm going to lightly set the stage with some peaks, but then we're going to go deep into the pits, because we all know those are where people struggle and they want to know, how do you get out of that pit? Right. So, but what were some peaks for you? If people wanted to see the highlight reel of Jason, what would that include?
Yeah. I think one of them would probably be, so if it's so funny because when people ask me like, how old are you again? Because I talk about this thing that happened and this thing that happened and this thing that happened. I feel like I have like 3 distinct lives that I've lived. And so one of them, minus being high school and growing up like everybody does, but my time as a youth pastor was a very distinct life, if that makes sense, because it was during that time running a lot of conferences. I'm asked to speak at lots of different events, kind of this rising star, if you will, in the church world, and which is why my name got thrown in the hat, to take that on. And so one of those would be probably speaking at this district conference. And I was talking about I'm an old millennial, but talking as a millennial who was young at the time, right? In my early 20s, talking about how do churches need to adapt in order to maximize getting the most out of millennials. And here's the mindsets, and here's the different things. And it's funny, as I go back and I look at that talk now, 15 years ago, 15, 17 years ago, whatever it was, it's amazing to see how many of those things have kind of come about naturally, meaning talking about millennials and saying we don't have trust in institutions. And at the time, that was, 17 years ago, it wasn't that big of a deal. But now it's kind of like everybody realizes, okay, there wasn't a whole lot of faith in institutions, but understanding the mindset behind that was, I remember being a kid and I'm bowling and I see O.J. Simpson. I'm like, oh, well, Cavasy was guilty. And then Clinton gets impeached, but then he's like, oh, sorry, I did lie to everybody. And so I was like, okay, well, I'm a kid and I'm, 10, 11, 12 years old. So how do I, as a kid, differentiate what is good and wrong? So I just like, oh, okay, so everybody's corrupt. So I guess that's just how it is. Right? So that's just
interesting.
Like it's a weird core memory, but then helping churches and pastors understand, like, just because you have a platform and a church does not mean you have authority.
So true.
And you have to earn that. Like, it's still, that's something that you're continually earning. So anyway, so I think that was kind of a cool peak moment, if you will, because it was very much, I was well known in that arena And still to this day, there's a lot of places I go in. Back in Montana, everybody's like, Pastor Jason. It's like, hey, it's been a while, but it's good to see you. Um, so, so that's fun. So that was one. I think the another one was probably probably in the business world. So when I took over that software company, uh, we were trying to figure stuff out. We ended up winning this RFP to be the national vendor for the I won't say the country, for another country in a different part of the world, and going through that whole process. And it was a lot of peaks and pits that happened during that whole thing,
Yeah.
and got very savvy in terms of business, and just because people say one thing to your face doesn't mean it's actually true. And then honestly, another one has been it almost sounds silly to say it, but it's right now. Like this time in my life has been so fun because
Yeah.
I love to travel and I love adventures, and knowing where I was 10 years ago to where I am today, there's a lot of times I just kind of pinch myself and I'm like, this is crazy. Like I look at
Yeah.
I'm not very active on social media. Part of it is because I understand like the psychological detriment that can be to a lot of
Yeah.
people. And if I just posted my life now, it is very fairy tale, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And honestly, like I look at my photo stream just from myself, and Apple, my iPhone pulls up, hey, remember this memory? And I look at those memories. I'm like, oh yeah, that was 6 months ago. Oh yeah, 6 months ago I was in that country. Oh, and a year and a half ago I was sailing in French Polynesia, and 2 months ago I'm hanging out with my kiddo in Machu Picchu and coffee farms in Peru. Right, all these amazing things. But that's not what made me, right? Like that's not the things that actually made me who I am. Exactly. And so these are very much I very much feel like I'm in a cool peak season right now.
So that's a perfect segue into this next question about the pits, because when we were on stage talking, a lot of what you and I were speaking about was adversity and those moments in time that really shape who we become, and how we choose to show up in those moments, and
Yeah,
how that makes us who we are, today, and then being able to build using those adversity moments to build resilience. In your life, you've had a few adversity moments, just a few.
yeah,
Talk to me about some of those. You went through, here's my highlights, but there are definitely things in your life that put you on a path, that put you in a
mhm,
direction. Um, and I want to go deep into these moments because I think for a lot of our listeners, I feel like whether they're entrepreneurs or business owners or in real estate or in the tech world, or or maybe not even any of those, but they've hit a wall, or they're struggling,
mhm.
or maybe they feel like they're in a pit right now and they don't know how to get out of it. Um, Talk us through a couple of those pit moments and kind of what you were going through during those moments, talk about kind of your mental state in that moment in time.
Sure. I think that the there's a lot of in my opinion, there's a lot of mindset that comes with that, and I'm trying. I know that we're on a podcast, but right, the fun thing is that we got to hang out a lot the last few months
I
as we
know.
were preparing to speak together and
I
things like
know.
that. So
I
I
know.
was like, "Oh, you've probably already heard this." I'm like, "Yeah, but the listeners haven't." So that's
Yeah.
kind of the
Yeah.
point. So,
Exactly.
um, but even just I was thinking back to kind of some mental toughness pieces, and so I had a friend several years ago, and we worked together on an executive team, and we were having some trouble with this middle manager, and he stops me at one point. He says, "Jason, what's the hardest thing you've ever done?" Just kind of random. And I was like, I don't know. What do you mean? Like physically, emotionally, spiritually? Like what kind of tough are we talking about?
Yeah.
Because the guy is amazing. Adam, he was a sniper for the military, combat veteran, and several tours, and just this amazing guy. And now he's got 10 kids. It's not a lie. He's got 10 kids.
Whoa.
Amazing dad, like just this gentle, like giant of a man. Um, Look up to him, respect him huge. But it made me think about, oh, that's a good point. Like there's all these different hard
Yeah.
adversities that we go through. So when I think about like a difficult one that definitely shaped that in me, I don't share this story very often anymore. I used to a lot, but when I was so I got done with high school, went to this program called Master's Commission. It was really good for me in a lot of senses because it was it was YWAM, but it was also like the people that ran it were former Marines. And, one of the guys was a former Marine. So we were doing PT at 6 a.m. and we were doing it like the military. And it was great because Jeff put us through the paces. I have never been that in shape in my life. And it was awesome. But in the same sense, we also had this attitude of like, okay, well, we can go anytime, any place, anywhere God calls us to go, we're going to go. And so we kind of had this like spiritual pride, arrogance about us as well. But we ended up going to Guatemala, and we ended up going to some back country like area that they still live in mud huts. They don't speak Spanish. It's some other dialect. I don't know if it's Quechua or whatever. So translating was fun. We had to go 3 ways. But at that time, for whatever reason, I just turned 18. So I just had turned 18 like a month before 2 months before we go. And so while we're there, we felt like, hey, we need to go reach out to these other villages and these other people in different part of this backcountry. And so said, okay, we're going to go. And everybody in the village was like, no, don't go there. Like there's a lot of bad history in Guatemala with guerrilla warfare and things like that. Sandinistas, all the stuff that happened in the 80s. So if you go there, they don't know who you are and they'll probably kill you. So like, well, we're going to go anyway. So, right. My mom probably didn't want to know that. And so we ended up writing letters to our family. Like, hey, if we die, here's kind of where we were. Here's all the stuff. And so like this weird, surreal feeling doing that. We end up going up over the mountain. We get to the top of the mountain and we're talking to some people. I'm the only person that kind of knows Spanish. So fortunately the guy at the top knew Spanish and we're talking and said, how do we get over there? And same thing. He's like, no, don't go there. It's a bad idea. And he said, well,
people have said, don't go there.
Yeah. Well, it wasn't just 2, like this whole village and then this guy on the top of the mountain.
Oh my God.
Yeah. And, but when you're young and dumb and zealous, I guess you do young, dumb things. So I said, well, how do we get there? And he said, well, you just take this road and it goes down around whatever. I said, well, we can see it right over there. And I've got lots of experience in the mountains. I'm like, well, how come we can't just go down and go up? He goes, no, that's too steep. You'll be in trouble. So being dumb and getting dark, and we're like, we can do it. So we start going down the hill. And as we're going down, it turns into like cliffs, like 6 feet, 10 feet. And so we're kind of like down climbing with our backpacks. We get to one and Dan, who was the leader of the group, he looked over, he's like, nah, it's too steep. My buddy Andrew gets to the edge and then I look up and he slips on something and his backpack like throws him over the edge. And he gets to the bottom and he just starts screaming like a little kid, just like screaming. And then he just stops. At first I thought he was being dumb. Like I thought I was just being a goofball. So I'm like, Andrew, shut up. And so we take our backpacks off, we run around, we get down to where he's at. I'm not the first person to get there. Dan is. And Dan's like, I don't have a pulse. I'm not getting breathing. What are we going to do? And so he's like, I just grabbed him and was like, in Jesus' name, live. And then Andrew's eyes pop open. And then Andrew's like full amnesia, massive concussion. And Andrew's part of the story is he's like, I feel like I went somewhere else. He said, and I knew that they were kind of like angels around me and they were talking about me. I don't know what they were saying, but then it was like, oh, I guess I'm not done. And he's like, and I just remember coming back and being like, what is going on, guys? Like, where are we? And so I just turned 18, right? I'm still a kid.
Right.
So Dan says, well, we got to get him out of here. So, and he had broken both of his wrists and both he was in bad shape. We end up, taking basically hours to climb back up to kind of where this spot was. The rest of the story is wild, but Dan eventually gets back to camp, where some other people of our team are. And I'm there by myself and just checking on Andrew all night just to make sure that, he's breathing and concussion protocol and all that stuff. And it was just kind of this weird, like, okay, and just totally freaked out of my mind, right? About the whole experience. We get a van up there or a truck comes up, gets Andrew out. He ends up getting out to the United States. I end up staying in Guatemala for another week, and kind of felt like I let the team down in lots of different ways. And it just like all these weird things, but that being a hard, right? So like physically, I know, and then I also did mountain guiding for a little while as part of that group and stuff like that. So I know physically what I can do and push my mind through. Okay. So there's that hard, which is kind of a fun story. When
Story.
Yeah, that's why I'm like, I don't talk about it a whole lot these days.
That's crazy. I mean,
Yeah,
you hear stories, honestly, like, well, this has been a while back, but the gentleman, the missionary that had gone into a really remote village, and they killed him. They did kill him. And many years later, his wife went back, and the name is escaping me right at the moment, but his wife actually went back to that village to witness to them. And it is definitely, I think it takes a certain kind of mindset to be able to do that. But the experience that you had is definitely at 18 years old
yeah,
is, I don't know. Yeah. I don't know how that doesn't shape a huge chunk of your life, having that kind of experience at 18. And I mean, just so young, both spiritually, physically, and mentally,
yeah,
all wrapped up into that one experience.
yeah. And it was an interesting, as I would tell that story to people, there's a lot of people like, oh man, well that would definitely, excuse me. My grandpa's probably the funniest. He's like, oh, that would definitely shore my faith up in a hurry, just kind of like. And it's funny because if that was the only story, then that would be cool, right? Because it's like, okay, like great faith, whatever. And Andrew does great. He's a missionary in, can't say where, but he's been a missionary. He's got kids, and a wonderful guy.
Yeah.
We're still in touch to this day. But that was, and then became a youth pastor after that. Felt I was supposed to do that. Worked with my parents, all those kind of things, and then going into business, and then. There's this thing that happens, I think, with a lot of entrepreneurs and founders, is we have to be a little optimistic. Actually, we got to be a lot of optimistic, and sometimes like stupidly, ridiculously optimistic, because we don't know what's going to happen or how it's going to work out or whatever.
We have to be a little bit delulu.
Yeah, exactly. Problem with that is if you don't define reality, like that's not actually leadership, right? You're not actually like saying this is actually where we're at.
Yeah.
And we've got to make hard decisions, and we have to have hard conversations. And so if I fast forward a little bit to my next life, if you will, right, in the business world, and I'm definitely in that. I'm running this software company. I'm running another company, trying to make it work. I had just moved to Seattle. We have our first kid, and we're going backwards in a serious way. But me being delusional and not wanting to define reality, meaning like we're gonna have to make some hard decisions here, and just having the guts to say those things. I just kept being delusional. There were several things that happened, and all of a sudden it just all like came crashing down in 2016. And and if people saw my life up until that point, they're like, oh, this is nice and fairy tale. Your parents are great, which they are. My upbringing was fun. Obviously, it had its challenges, like everybody. I go become this youth pastor. I'm speaking on stages. I'm doing all this really cool stuff. And then it's kind of like, I heard this phrase. It's like, and then life let go. And that's kind of how I felt. I turned 30, and then life let go. And then all of a sudden, okay, I'm almost bankrupt. I made a lot of really stupid decisions. I almost lost my marriage. And it was that December of 2016 when I'm walking through Target with my kiddo, and he wants this car hauler toy, this Matchbox thing, and it's like $20, and I can't afford it. And I'm like, I can't do this. And just like this weird like shame of like, okay, I'm not a good husband. I'm not a good father. What the hell am I doing? Like, what am I doing? Like, I think I'm doing this right thing. And at the same time, a lot of like massive doubts in terms of like faith. Like, okay, God, if you are good, what is all this about? And questioning a lot of like deep things that I think I just took for granted. Especially being a pastor's kid, especially growing up in the church. I know all the right things to do. I know the right things to say, and I know how to kind of get by. But was it actually me, and was it actually mine? Was it like, what are the things that I believe, and what do you really believe about life, God, goodness, when it seems like it's all evaporated or evaporating all at the same time? So then if we go further there, so I'm in the middle of all this like major crisis emotionally, and I'm going to counseling at this time, which couldn't afford that either, but I made it happen because I'm like, I have to do this. and I'd moved to Seattle. And in hindsight, it's always right. You can always look back and see these markers. I don't know if I would have been able to do that if I lived in Montana, because I knew everybody and everybody knew me. I tell people Montana is just a big, small town. It's a really cool place to be. Yeah. But I don't know if I would have done it. I don't know if I would have gotten healthy. I don't know if I would have gotten the help that I needed if I didn't live in Seattle, where I could literally be anonymous. Nobody knew me.
Yeah, man.
And
Sometimes
so,
environment is so important.
yeah,
It's a changing environment.
yeah, for sure. And so then in 2017, this was part of the story that I shared on stage with you, was so that's 2016. A major thing happens. I guess kind of another like turning point, like God, kind of a God moment that showed up here. I had this conference that I'm supposed to go to in Calgary, Alberta, with my best friend Ray, who we do the podcast together. And I'm like, do I go? Do I not? I'm like, I already have the plane ticket, so I'm just going to show up, and me and Ray are going to go. So we go to this conference, and while I'm getting on the airplane, my wife calls me and says, "Hey, Peyton, my kiddo, who's 3 at the time, he just jumped off this and he just broke his leg." So it's like, okay, now what am I going to do? Like, am I going to go home? Am I going to plow forward? Am I going to keep going? End up going. Super transformational in terms of like another, like God's like, hey, I got you. Even though you don't get it, I got you. And so me and Ray talk about that all the time still. So it's just like, man, this really impactful event. Then 2017, right? Still trying to like dig out of this, like figure out like what in the world we're going to do. And the timeline is nuts, because we're working on this deal with this country, that high point, if you will. It's like, man, we got this contract. Like, now we just got to build it and make it happen. And they strung us along for 2 years. And so the timeline is June. I go back to Montana to run a fireworks stand, or several of them, because I used to do that. And that was a way that I just made money when I was in college. I was like, great, I can make 10 grand pretty easy, and I know how to do it. I got the people, whatever. So I run back, and we're doing that. While we're there, my father-in-law ends up passing away tragically. And and my wife happened to be there when all that happened and had to go through that. And then, I'm still doing this, and then we've got this estate we've got to deal with, because, right, all the stuff that comes along with that. And then, so that was June. And then in July, my brother gets admitted to Warm Springs, which is a mental institution, because of some things that happened. He got diagnosed with bipolar disorder. And then in August, the deal that we've been working on, I'm supposed to fly to New Zealand, this other country. I'm supposed to fly to this other country to go into the deal. And a few weeks before I'm supposed to go, the Minister of Defense, one of the head people, calls me up and unilaterally just kills the deal. I was like, okay, this is a multi-million-dollar deal that is going to turn a lot of things around. I've already started scaling up for this thing. Like, okay, now what? And there's no recourse. And then so that's August. And then September, we finally get home. We're like, okay, can we just relax for a minute? And I sit down with my therapist, and I'm just telling him stuff. And he's like, geez, man, this is crazy. And then October 12 of that year. So now it's October. That's when my dad calls me and says, hey, your brother passed away from an overdose. And so kind of another like, okay. And then 2 weeks later, my grandpa passes away. And so just this crazy string of like this year and a half. And then we had other family members all pass away. We had a bunch, pass away before the end of the year that year. They're more distant, aunts and uncles and different things like that. Just weird stuff. And so physically, I would almost rather have a physical hard, because I know that's like, this too shall pass, right?
Mm-hmm.
When you're going through grief or like emotional like reconstruction of yourself and like all the really hard, deep things there, that's in my experience, it seems like it's way harder, because it doesn't feel like it's ever going to end.
Yeah. Well, and it's, I think, a little bit more, when you have a physical heart, it's something you feel like you can prepare for, right? You can train for a marathon. That's hard. You can train for a UFC fight. That's hard. You can train for those things, to build that resilience. When it's a mental hard, like experiencing these things that you don't know are coming, that's way different, right? How do you train for someone passing away unexpectedly, and not just one person, but 2 or 3 people in a short period of time? how do you like mentally build resilience for that? Like it's just it's a different it is you're right. It's a different kind of hard, and it still builds resilience, but I do feel like it can be a lot harder to prepare for because you don't know what's
Yeah.
coming.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's the unexpected and the blind side. And for me, up until that point, I'd never really lost anybody super close to me. So I hadn't really gone through grief that way. And
Right.
so having to walk through that and then realizing like all the stages of it and all the stuff that goes through it, um, when that happens to somebody for the first time and you realize that this too shall pass, not that there's not still grief, not that there's not still things and memories that come with that are hard, but you realize like in the same way a physical like this too shall pass, this is going to pass. And for me there was a couple of like God moments that happened in there too, and one of them was when I just helped my parents like get through the funeral, and I was doing a lot of the logistics and stuff just to try to help them get through it. And so did the viewing and all this stuff. And so I remember going in and after it was all said and done, and just having this like what is all this about? And it's kind of this weird understanding that you can't explain it, but it was kind of like Jesus just saying, hey, like I don't get this, like God, I don't understand any of this, but I know that you're good. And I don't know why I know that, and I don't know how I know that, because it definitely doesn't make sense,
Yeah.
but I know that you're good and I know that you're here. And so I guess we're going to walk through this.
So
So
do you ever feel like during any part of that time, do you ever feel like your faith wavered at all, or do you feel like it solidified your faith? Like because I feel like that can happen, right? You can go
yeah.
down this road of a Y in the road where I've known people to go through horrific experiences, and it causes them to question their faith or question God or even his existence, right?
Yeah.
And or why would he allow that to happen? And then I know other people that they take these horrific experiences, and it's like it takes their faith to a whole other level. And so how do you feel like you process that? Like when you were presented with a little bit of this why in the road,
Hmm.
how did you decide, like, you know what, I'm digging my heels in, and either my faith is going to get stronger, or you're going to go down this other path? Like how did you work through that in your mind?
Yeah. I I think it definitely it wasn't a solidifying in the beginning at all. In fact, it was kind of this, because I know all the right answers, right? Being
Mhm.
a pastor's kid and growing up.
Yep. Another thing we have in
Unfortunately,
common.
yeah. And unfortunately, I mean, seems like it feels like I just talk about hardship. I had a good friend pass away a year ago, and I got to speak at his funeral, and it was, and he was a preacher, and I would always tease him because I was like, Mick, I'm like, I know what you're saying. Like he didn't grow up in the church, and so but he'd like really get on these like cliche type phrases. I'm like, Mick, I know what you're saying. However, I said it's really easy for us to like say the taglines and to have the cliches,
Yeah.
but unfortunately, it cheapens the message of what you're actually saying.
Yeah.
And so it's a real difficult skill to actually unpack that for people.
Mm-hmm.
It's easy to say praise the Lord.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what exactly does that mean? Or it's easy to say like, man, God is good all the time. It's like, okay, is he? Like, how do you help people unpack those questions? Because those are the questions that people have. And
Yeah.
unfortunately, we reduce this amazing relationship experience, everything, to a handful of cliches, and it loses the power and the meaning of what it actually is. So for me, it was really helpful because I actually pulled away from faith almost completely for a little while.
Mm.
And it seems counterintuitive, because and the reason I did that was okay, I know the right answers over here. And unfortunately, like going through some of those crises, I reached out to a few pastors, and all the advice they gave me was crap. And I don't know a nicer way to say that.
Yeah.
It was not good advice.
Yeah.
And so as I look back, I was like, it wasn't, I have a lot of grace towards them. It wasn't that they didn't have the best of intentions. They
Sure.
just
Oh
didn't know
yeah.
what they didn't know. And so for me, having to then go, found a therapist, a counselor who was actually happened to be a Christian himself, which was really this weird he was a few years older than me. So kind of this older brother, like would
Yeah.
call me out on my stuff. And at the same time, like loved me through it. Like I remember whining to him once. His name was Chris. I was like, Chris, I, this happened, this, and this, and this, and this. And is it always going to be like this? And just kind of like this whiny moment. And he just like, he like leans back in his chair and crosses his arms. He's like, so you don't believe in redemption? I was like, dang it, man. Like, why you got to be like that? Like, whereas, if I said that to a couple of pastors and they basically would give me the same cliche answers, if that makes sense. Right. And so
Yeah.
it's like that, I understand your heart and you're wanting to, but you're not, it's not actually helping me right
Yep.
now.
Yeah.
And so because of that pullback, it actually gave me in the same way, like being anonymous in Seattle, I didn't have to have a face anymore because I was really good at that. I was really good at having whatever face people wanted me to have. But when I pulled back and got to be anonymous and got to figure it out for myself, it was another unearthing of what do I actually believe and what do I actually
Mm-hmm.
see and what does my relationship with God look like? And so then having that, like, I want to go back to zero. I want to take this to nothing. And then when the Holy Spirit like speaks to you in unique ways, like I remember driving on the road to the road to Bellevue from where we lived in the Seattle area. So I'm driving up to Bellevue. I think it might have been for counseling, and I was listening to uh there was some song that just like came on the radio, and I remember the corner that I'm coming around, and it just like this drop in my spirit that was like, hey, your family's going to be strong again. And I just like I'm bawling because my family's not strong at this point, like at all. And I'm just like, okay, kind of like one of those that didn't happen in a church. It wasn't
Yep.
from this good advice. It was like, okay, God, if you are real and you are who you say you are, then you're gonna have to show up
Yep.
because I don't believe any of this other stuff right now. So I think that unearthing and that becoming was actually the thing that sustained me getting into then 2017 and going through that with my brother and kind of that other knowing of like, okay, God, I don't get this, but I know that you're good. So okay,
There's actually a song out there, and I'm horrible with like names of songs and singers and stuff, but there's a song um about where I found God, or where I find God, like, and it's like out fishing, or driving around in the combine, or like it has
is it
these
like
like
a country song or like a K-Love song?
no, it's like a country song, and
Okay,
I
okay.
I totally can't think of the name of it right now, but it is very much about God meeting us where we're at, right? Like, and this is not a thing against being in church. I love going to church, but I think that sometimes there's this myth or false belief that that's the only place that you can encounter God.
Yeah,
And that's just not true, right? Like, you
yeah.
can encounter God like on your knees in your room, by yourself. You can encounter God driving down the road. Like, I texted you yesterday, I don't remember what we were talking about, and I said, man, I've had worship music on since my feet hit the floor until I got
Oh
to
yeah.
the office, right? Like, it's that worship is warfare, right? Like, I wasn't in church worshiping, I was in my car driving. I'm sure people thought I was crazy, but I was so, and what's funny is I even got home last night and did another hour of worship. Like, God meets you where you are. He finds you where you are, and in those moments, and he speaks to us in so many different ways, right? Like, I mean, it could be
Yeah.
whether it's music or a person that says something to you. And I love that you brought up that he just sat back and like looked at you like, really? Like, so you don't believe in redemption? Like, I bring that up all the time in business around coaches, right? Like, business
Mm.
coaches.
Yeah, yeah.
So many business coaches they show up as a friend.
Mm. Yeah.
And not saying a friend is bad, but when I pay for a coach, I pay for somebody to be in my face, call me out on my stuff. Like, don't let me slide. Don't let me get away with the things. Don't let me stew
Yeah.
in whatever I'm stewing in, right? Like, I want them to call me out on it. Because to me, that's brave. Like, that's someone who really, really is caring about not just my soul, but just like, if I'm hitting my goals, if I'm hitting my targets. Like, you never say gee, that coach really, I really love that coach because they never really pushed me, but they encouraged me a lot. Like you don't hear people say that. So for you to say that about this person who's like questioning you while you're whining, and I love that you said that you're whining. I'm having a hard time envisioning you whining, but it's so this is kind of a funny vision for me. But for him to sit back and be like, really, really, like
Yeah.
I think people like that are gold.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Yeah. Unbelievable guy. Cause, and being able to hold the other side too, when I'm there and just like telling him about my brother and my father-in-law and like
Yeah,
all this stuff, and him to hold that too and be like,
yeah,
holy smokes, man. Like
yeah.
that's heavy. It's like, yeah, it is.
Yeah, he
There's
wasn't
a,
he wasn't discounting what you were going through.
no.
He
Yeah.
was questioning your
Response.
belief and response around
Yeah.
that. Yeah,
Right. Yeah.
big
Yeah.
difference. Man. So talk to me a little bit more. I want to go deeper onto the faith side. We haven't gone as deep in that as I kind of want to. Um, you grew up, you said it right, as a preacher's kid.
Mhm.
I did as well. My stepdad was a pastor, and so we got real good at, I feel like, checking the boxes. And it wasn't until much later in life that I read a book that really changed everything for me. And you mentioned this too, so I kind of want to go into this.
Sure.
Learning how to have your own relationship with
Mm.
God outside of the expectations and the check boxes and the face that you talked about, feeling like sometimes you could put on whatever face you thought people needed in that
Mhm.
in that moment. And I remember that too. I remember growing up like 12 years old thinking like I I literally remember feeling like my face is going to fall off because I'm having to smile so much, like, at a function or something, at a church function or something. And it's like, and so that's when you talk about having to put on that face, I really resonate with that. Cause I literally felt like my lips were like going to
Yeah.
melt off my face. Um, how did you develop that relationship, a more intimate relationship with God, to where it wasn't a it wasn't about this framework that everybody else put around you, but it was
Yeah.
around you and God, and that was it. Just talk me through your journey into getting into relationship with God in that way.
Yeah. And I think it happened. I think there was phases of it, if you will, right? Because there
Sure.
was the high school. I went to a Christian school, and not like a cool Christian school like Sanium. More like a graduating class of 9, right? Like
Oh, wow.
very,
Tiny.
and half of the school was pastors' kids usually, and the other half was kids that got kicked out of the public school system. So
Okay.
I learned a lot of really fun things. A
Such a
lot of friends that were drug dealers
oh,
when I was in high school. So, and per capita, we had a lot of them in this little high school. So, um, and so it was very much, everything was about, my parents, and yeah, I played music and I was on worship teams and stuff like that, but very little actual relationship, if that makes sense. Mostly because I saw um, this crazy, not even hypocrisy, because that word I think is used too much too, but just kind of this disconnect is
okay, yeah,
another word.
fair.
Because there's a lot of people, because I played punk rock bands, which I know people have a hard time believing that too, but I played in punk rock bands, and I'd go hang out with all my friends that were skaters and,
You
golf.
have
And
surprises around every corner.
I know. So I was like, how old are you again? Um, and I had more of a genuine relationship with them than I did with most other people in the church world, because it's like, okay, you again, like if I'm hanging out with these skater punk kids, like they just know me as Jason. That's it. And so I can like let some walls down, because I think, whether it's right or not, I think that we do that within the institution of church, that we kind of put walls up and we put on the face. At least I did.
Hmm.
So then going to that ministry training school was kind of the same. I was good at putting on the face for a while, but the breaking down, if you will, of myself, I mean, like, okay, what do I actually believe? Yeah, I know the Bible stories. I would go to youth group and kind of have this cocky attitude. I'm like, nah, I don't need a Bible. I got it memorized. That was my, my attitude. But then actually like learning it for myself, like having these times of just like, I'd get home and I'd sit and just like, I'd be studying scripture for an hour or 2 hours and just like these amazing things that I would learn over time. Right. And that was super pivotal. Then when I moved into being a youth pastor, it was easy to go back to what I knew. And that was to put on the face and just be good and all the stuff. So when all those things happened and I had to deconstruct and be like, okay, what is true, what is not, and then how do I unpack the relationship, like you're saying, like how do I differentiate that? Because I have a good relationship with the church.
Yeah.
I know the things to do, but I don't really know what a relationship with God looks like. Even though, again, goes back to the cliche things like, well, do you know Jesus is your personal Lord and Savior? It's like, okay, say that to anybody on the street, they have no idea what you're talking about. So let's unpack that. Like, what exactly does that mean?
Yeah.
And I think that finding finding who God is in the pits, like you're saying,
Yeah.
was actually, I think, revealed to me the character of God in a way that not going through them wouldn't have done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't think that the relationship that I have with God today would be there if it wasn't for going through the adversity and going through the stuff.
Yeah. Yeah. Same. It's funny because I had a conversation the other day with somebody, and we were talking about how, at least my experience when I started going to church again in my adult years, I kind of had come full circle, and I didn't go to church for a long time, like 20 years, didn't go to church.
Yeah.
And I believed in God, but didn't have a relationship with him. Right. And so when I started going back to church again, one of the things that was really hard for me to process was emotion. Like
Hmm.
every time we'd have music play, I would cry. And I'm like, really? I don't want to go to church because I'm just going to cry. Like, I don't want to do that. Right. But when you're talking about like that adversity, if you hadn't gone through the things that you went through, then you may
Mm-hmm.
not have come to just realize or even had that opportunity to get a closer relationship with God. And I can completely relate to that just from a standpoint of just that one little story of like every time I'd go to church, and it still happens to me to this day, not every single time, but there can just be a particular song or a particular thing I'm going through. And for me, I think I've just come to feel like the experience is the Holy Spirit just moving through me and being in a place where I'm feeling that emotion because the Holy Spirit is present, right?
Yeah.
Um, I don't always feel that kind of emotion when I'm not in worship. It's just different. I can't really explain it. I can't really put a lot of words to it, but I do agree with you that adversity, I think it really is that key factor, is that turning point sometimes, not for everyone, but I think for a lot of people, that adversity is the thing that um, causes them to go so much deeper into that faith and that relationship. What exactly for you has your faith, or how has your faith incorporated into your business? Have you incorporated it into your business? And if you have, what does that look like?
Yeah. That's a good question. Um, it's not actually super overtly part of that,
Mhm.
part of my business. The vast majority of companies that I work with are Christian.
Mm,
And so, and part of that I think is because I only work with people on a referral basis.
okay.
So somebody has to recommend that I work with somebody, and
Yeah.
then it has to be a good fit and all the other stuff. So I think that there's probably an element of that. Um, yeah, but pretty much everybody is. And so for those that are and that are okay with it, yeah, I mean, I'm happy to jump in and say, hey guys, let's ask for wisdom
Hmm.
because we don't have all the answers. And
Yeah.
so being able to do that. I think it's also a very interesting testament. It seems like an interesting time right now in like with Charlie Kirk passing away,
Yeah.
and there's a lot more people that are way more um, upfront about their faith. You know,
Hmm.
even from the vice president down. You know, I
Yeah.
mean, it's like
Yeah.
everybody's more okay in coming into. It's interesting because somebody was saying that in the 1980s, early 90s, to have faith on your sleeve was actually politically advantageous for people, right?
Hmm.
It was part of the Reagan era. And then it was kind of neutral in the 90s.
Hmm.
And then it became actually to your detriment politically if you had, if you're wearing faith on your sleeve at all. And so it's kind of an interesting, like, how these cycles happen. And I don't think we're back to being advantageous, but it's more of the, like, okay, for those that believe in Jesus, in truth, we're going to have to stand up, and we're going to have to be more vocal. Doesn't need to be obnoxious, doesn't need to be in people's face, but it is not a shrinking back from
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
And being able to help walk through that. Yeah. I don't know if that
I very much
answers.
agree. And I think there's different levels of that, right? Like you said, it doesn't have to be obnoxious. But there does have to be this understanding of, like, I mean, it talks very much in the Bible about being lukewarm and
Hmm.
how much God despises that. And so I think that for some people, it can be easy to take the stance of, well, if I am vocal about my faith, or if I stand up for that, then I will lose my business. I will lose my
Mm.
clientele, right? Um, and I think the general advice in business for a very long time has been, right, don't talk politics, don't talk religion, don't talk about those things, and not just business, but like family dinners, right? Like,
Yeah, right.
it's just cliche. You just don't do it. It's taboo. Um, and I also think that lack of conversation, or the unwillingness to have the conversation, is also what's led to a huge problem in society. Uh, because now we don't know how to have those conversations,
Right.
or at least have them civilly, right? Like
Yeah.
that is a very big problem right now. Um, yeah, we actually little plug for next year we'll be having a Christians in Business type event, and a large part of that topic is going to be around, you know, do you choose to be vocal in your business or not? How much do you incorporate faith into your business or not? And the fear that's around that, because I think there is a lot of fear around that. I want to jump into your book a little bit, because I see your book right behind you there.
Sure. Oh, yeah.
Yep.
The commercial goes there.
I want to jump into that. Talk to me about, I'm going to just switch gears here for a minute, kind of a 180 on you, but talk to me about your book. How did your book come about? What caused you to write it? And I'd love for you to kind of go into maybe just a little piece of your book, a little piece of that framework
Yeah.
that's in there.
Sure. So it was a little over a year ago, because I worked with my cousins, for the last 10 years. And so um, I was having a conversation with my cousin Kevin, and he said, I was traveling a lot for doing the work that I do, the coaching, consulting, and
Yeah.
different stuff. He said, why don't you just go full time and do that? I was like, oh, that actually kind of sounds fun. Like, I still am around the businesses, and I still kind of know what's going on here. So I said, yeah, okay. So if I was going to do that, what would be the most helpful thing I could do? I
Mm,
said, well, I'll write a book, because if nothing else, it's a cool prop, and I can give it away to people. And at least, and it was fun. The writing process was fun for me, because when I started writing it was kind of boring me,
mm.
because I'm writing about things like, okay, you have to have objectives, and you have to have a team that comes together, and those kind of things. And if you wrote it like a textbook, it's really dry stuff. So I
Uh-huh.
said, okay, well, I'm gonna write it like a narrative, and I'm gonna come up with fictitious characters. And so a lot of the characters are hybrids of actual clients and conversations that we've had, and it was actually kind of fun. I was like, oh yeah, this is a good time to pull and write these things. So there's not an actual company, but it's a hybrid of lots of companies and lots of people that I've worked with,
Yeah.
and trying to also suss out the different, like, personality types and temperaments,
Hmm.
because you have to learn how to work with a lot of different types of people when you're running a company. So, so that was kind of the thought and the piece around it. The idea with it was, I work with a lot of, not exclusively, but I work with a lot of businesses in the trades.
Hmm.
And the fun part about that is that those guys didn't go to school to run a business for the
Yeah.
most part.
Yeah.
They maybe went to trade school, or they just
Yeah.
started working out of high school and they were good at a thing, but then they woke up one day and they're like, "Oh no, I've got 20 people that work for me. Now
Isn't
what
it
am I
so
going to do?"
true around so many industries though? Like,
Yeah.
think about, like, I'm just randomly going to pick here, but when we were practicing for our speech, right, we would go to a coffee shop. Well,
Yeah.
if somebody opens a coffee shop, usually it's probably because they have a love for people or for
Yeah.
coffee. But it wasn't because they were like, oh, I just I have a love of business, right?
Right.
Like, and so there's
Yeah.
these skill sets. It doesn't matter if it's a real estate agent. It doesn't matter if it's um, a painting company, an electrical company, a coffee company. Like
Yeah.
there's this big difference between the skill set you learn around your industry and then the skill set you learn around actually running a business and an organization. Like what gets you here doesn't get you here, kind of a
Yeah.
mentality. Um,
For sure.
so I love
Yeah.
that you bring that up. You shared some stats, and I hopefully you can maybe pull these off the top of your head, but you shared some stats on stage that I would love for you to share here that just had to do simply with we were talking about goals, right?
Yeah.
And the studies that are around that,
Oh,
because
sure.
what made me think of it was the book, right? Less than like 2%, I think, is the stat of people of the human race have written a book. It's like, and maybe even less than 1%. So it's
Huh?
a very small club to be in, right? When
Yeah.
you author a book and actually get it to the finish line. And then you shared stats about goal setting. And I would love to have you share those again on here because I think they're
Yeah.
kind of mind blowing.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's so yeah, it was fun putting our talk together because then it was, kind of this anticlimactic piece of, and what do you need to do? You
Yeah.
need to set goals. And everybody's like, okay, well, that's not that
Yeah.
fun. Like,
Yeah.
we all know that. Yeah, we know that, but it's amazing. You're right. It's amazing how many people don't, and that was kind of the point. So a couple times this year, I got to speak to they were the emerging leaders or the emerging talent groups within the Albany Chamber and then the Bend Chamber. So it was probably a total between the two, maybe 100 people.
Mhm.
But between those two, I asked the question: how many of you here? And these are usually, uh, early 20s
Yeah.
to mid 30s.
Yeah.
How many of you in your professional career, whatever, like, do you have any goals written down? And it was less than half the room, probably 40%,
Mhm.
had written goals, which means that over half of the room didn't have anything written down. So it's kind of like, yeah, you know that you're supposed to do it, or maybe you don't know how. Okay, I'll give you that. Or it's just you don't, because it's so easy to go on autopilot in life.
Mhm.
So the thing that I talk about. There was actually a study that happened in Harvard, so the Harvard MBA, so the Masters of Business Administration. In 1979, they did a study to the graduating class, and they wanted to follow this graduating class over 10 years to see what kind of the outcomes they had. So these, I mean, Harvard MBA, you're no slouch, right? To even
Yeah.
get in the program, et cetera. So in 1979, they did the study, and they followed everybody, and it was I gotta remember the numbers off the top of my head. It was essentially around 10%
Mm.
that said yes, I've got written goals. So it was about 90 or 87% that didn't have any written goals at all. Said no, I'm just graduating. I guess I'll go apply for a job, go figure it out, right? 10% had written goals, and then there was 3% that had written goals and an actual action plan to make that happen. So within the framework, like, a lot of the things I do is helping, like, okay, if this is the goal that you have, right, this is the big picture, we need to bring this way back into perspective. And what are the things that we're doing today and that we are doing that are actually it's not just a random event, but it's actually propelling us towards that 10-year objective.
Yeah.
And then how do we measure that? Like, what are the measurable pieces to make sure that we're on track for that? So anyway, the 3% that had a written plan, 10% that just wrote goals down, didn't have a plan, and then the 87% that had no plan. So they followed them 10 years, and then at the end of the 10 years, they found that the 10% that had written goals, and I could be wrong on these percentages, it is coming off the top of my head, but the 10% that had written goals were making about twice as much as those that didn't have a plan, which is pretty cool. But the real kicker was that the 3% that had goals and a written plan were on average making 10x what the rest of the 97% were.
Wow.
And again, these aren't slouches, and it's probably that they didn't know how to write a goal coming out of Harvard, the MBA program.
Crazy.
But it's
The
amazing how
difference
many
between
people.
the 10% and the 3%. Like I can definitely see that difference, the doubling, right? The 10% that had written their goals to those that had written none, right? That they doubled their income. But but that is a huge jump from the 10%
Yeah,
to the 3%. It wasn't just a double jump, it was 10 times
yeah.
more income.
And I think that it's like most plans. The thing that they wrote down in 1979 was not the thing that they had in 1989. I can almost guarantee that, right? But it's the fact that you're setting those targets, and it at least gives you some direction to move towards, which most people don't have. And so and for me, I started writing goals down. I think we talked about this at one of our times, prepping. Um, I started writing goals down, I think in like 2008 or 2009, and like written plans, and had a book that showed me like, here's how I write goals. And so had my 10-year and my 5-year and my 3-year and all these different things. And it's amazing to me. And this is just what I found over the years now. There was a couple of years where I didn't have written goals within that time frame, and those years sucked. And I can look back and I can say, like that whole time when I got fired from being a CEO and different things, like that whole time, we had a ton of goals and objectives for the company, but I didn't have any for myself. And that year was rough. It was a really rough year because I didn't really have a North Star for me anymore.
Right. Yeah.
Kind of an aside. But the thing that I find that's amazing is I look back through journals. I love looking back through old journals, and I can see that I generally never hit a 1-year goal. And I don't know why that is. Maybe I'm just too optimistic. My wife gives me a hard time that if I give her a deadline, she knows to double or triple my time frame because she knows me. Because I'm very optimistic. But my 3-year goals, weirdly enough, I hit most of them in 3 years. I don't know why that is. It's just an interesting thing that happens.
I don't remember who said this, but I recently heard a CEO that was talking about goals like that, and he said, that we drastically underestimate what we can do in 5 years, but we drastically overestimate what we can do in 1.
Yeah, totally agree with that. Yeah.
Kind of proving your point. Exactly. So.
Yeah. And it's fun, I guess. Going back to the book, one thing I was going to say too is that the goal for me writing the book was the core story is going to stay the same, but because after my cousins were like, "Hey, you should run a software company," I actually had to learn a little bit about software. And in the software world, you're always doing revisions, right? You're always updating stuff all the time. And so the thought with the book was, I'm going to be coming out with Rev 2 probably the end of the year, and because it's all on demand, right? I'm just doing it. I went through Kindle digital publishing to do it. So it's like, great, I'm going to put this next round of revisions into it and say, okay, here's the things that we learned of this year from this collective of other companies and the things that were working and weren't working. So we can streamline things a little bit better, like make it that much better for people moving forward. So it's kind of fun because I'm like, it's going to be kind of this living textbook, if you will, of like, here's a better practice that we found.
Yeah. So do you have, to kind of start wrapping us up here, do you have a favorite quote that you share in the book, or a favorite phrase, or a favorite verse even that kind of bubbles to the surface or comes to mind that you're like, if I could wrap this all up into this one statement, this is what it would be?
Yeah. I should look it up so I actually do justice.
Get it word.
I was like, I could probably paraphrase it, but
while you're looking it up, I will say, you guys, we will have links to Jason's book, to his social media channels, even though he said he's not on them all that much, but he is still on there. But we'll have links to his book so that you can get that, as well as to his social media channels so that you can follow him on there as well. So make sure to check out those when you're listening to this podcast. We will put the links up.
Yeah. No, can't find it. Here's the gist of it though.
Okay.
Is that so it's by Erwin McManus, who's been a mentor of mine for a long time. And the world is waiting for you to step into your greatness. And if you're not doing that, you're actually doing a disservice to other people around you. And for whatever reason, that kind of stuck with me. It's selfish for me not to live bigger, because there are other people that are counting on me to do that because their future is tied to mine.
Yeah. So. Yeah, I know oh, you're going to take me down a rabbit hole with that one. Again, don't remember who I heard this from. I wish I could remember the people that I hear these amazing things from, but they were talking about, if you're not living in the calling that God gave you, right? If you're not using the gift that God gave you, then you're kind of thumbing your finger at God. And I was like, ooh, that's harsh and true. Like, if you're choosing not to live in that space, like, he gave you a gift and he gave you a calling, he gave you a purpose. And if you're doubting that, then like, are you calling God a liar?
Mm,
It's like,
that's good.
man, that just stung. That sat with me for a
Mm,
hot minute. maybe longer,
yeah,
but such good stuff. Jason, I'm so stoked to have had you on here. I'm sure that in the future we will probably do another one of these, just because there's so much stuff to unpack, and I feel like we could probably talk for hours on here and uncover so many
for sure.
different aspects. But I really appreciate you coming on and being our guest on here and sharing some of your story. And I look forward to seeing what you do just in the rest of this year. You got like what,
3 months, last
days
quarter.
left. So TikTok.
Let's go get it.
Sounds good to me.
Thanks, Andrea.